You know how in The Lion King when it spells SEX in the dust? According to animator Tim Saito, the dust actually spells SFX and was intended as an innocent signature on behalf of the special effects department. This accidental subliminal message was in every version of the movie until Disney erased it from all future releases in 2002. The Lion King turns 30 years old today, so here are some things I bet you never knew about it. The origin of The Lion King is somewhat disputed. Former Disney Animation VP for Creative Affairs, Charlie Fink, claims that in the late 80s, he approached the studio leadership, which included Jeffrey Katzenberg, Roy E. Disney, and Peter Schneider, with the idea of Bambi in Africa, but with lions. He says Katzenberg balked at the idea initially, but encouraged Fink and his team to come up with some mythos for the story. Katzenberg, on the other hand, says that he, Roy E. Disney, and Schneider came up with the idea for The Lion King on their own. Katzenberg says he was particularly taken by the concept and thought it should be a coming-of-age story about life and death. He also says some of it was inspired by his own life in politics. And then there's the notion that Disney stole the concept of The Lion King from Osamu Tezuka's 1960s Japanese anime series Jungle Emperor, which was known as Kimba the White Lion in the United States. Kimba was massively popular in Japan, and The Lion King's release in the country actually led to protests and petitions by artists back in 1994. Simba voice actor Matthew Broderick even thought that at first he was working on an American adaptation of Kimba, because he was familiar with the animated series. Anyway, The Lion King directors Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff have claimed that they had no prior knowledge of Kimba, and the leaders of Tezuka Productions, which made Kimba the White Lion, have denied rumors that Disney paid them hush money over the two projects, and representatives from the company have said over the years that the similarities were just coincidental. Tezuka opted not to sue Disney for copyright infringement. That said, Lion King animators Tim Saito and Mark Hausler said they knew about Kimba, but that it didn't inspire The Lion King, saying Bambi was more their blueprint. But to this day, many people still find the parallels too obvious to be ignored. The Lion King was also heavily informed by Hamlet, of course, as well as biblical stories of Moses and Joseph. A lot of different people had a hand in writing The Lion King. From 1988 to 1989, 10 Disney staff writers wrote different script treatments for the movie. Jenny Tripp's version was the first to include the name Simba as the main character. Tripp had him go on an adventure where he gets separated from his pride. He's taken in by a baboon and mongoose, and then raised by baboons, and eventually has to fight an evil jackal. In 1990, Linda Wolverton, writer of Beauty and the Beast, was brought in to write the script, and she ended up writing several drafts of the movie. Her version focused on a battle between lions and baboons, with Scar being the leader of the baboons. Rafiki was a cheetah, and Timon and Pumbaa were Simba's childhood friends. That version of the movie, titled King of the Jungle, was much more naturalistic than what the film eventually became. Producer Tom Schumacher called it an animated National Geographic special. George Scribner, who directed Oliver and Company, was then brought in to direct, and he wanted to make it like a documentary kind of film, very focused on nature. He was joined by co-director Roger Allers, and in October of 1991, the two of them, plus a bunch of other leads on the movie, went and visited Hell's Gate National Park in Kenya to study and appreciate the environment that they would be animating. But then after 6 months, Scribner left the project because he disagreed with Allers and the producer's decision to make it a musical. Rob Minkoff then came on to co-direct in April of 1992. This was both Allers and Minkoff's first feature film directing job. Don Hahn then came on as producer and charged them with reworking the story. So at this point, they nailed down that Mufasa would return as a ghost, that Scar and Mufasa would be brothers, and that Rafiki would be a little bit wacky. They also officially retitled the movie The Lion King. Also around this time, Disney CEO Michael Eisner and studio head Jeffrey Katzenberg advised them to make it more Shakespearean and infuse it with Hamlet. Linda Wolverton then left the project to go work on the Broadway version of Beauty and the Beast, so Allers and Minkoff interviewed new screenwriters, including Billy Bob Thornton and Joss Whedon. But Irene Mecci and Jonathan Roberts got the job. They worked with lyricist Tim Rice to make sure that his song lyrics fit the story, and the song lyrics and dialogue were being changed all through production. On to casting. James Earl Jones was cast as Mufasa because the directors found his voice powerful and kind of like the roar of a lion. Nathan Lane originally auditioned for Zazu, and Ernie Sabella went out for one of the hyenas. Lane and Sabella were actually starring together in a Broadway production of Guys and Dolls at the time, and were asked to then read together as the hyenas, and off of this audition, they cast them as Timon and Pumbaa. The original idea for the hyenas was to reunite Cheech and Chong. Cheech Marin agreed to voice Bonsai, but Tommy Chong was unavailable, so they changed that role to a woman woman hyena, Shenzi, and cast Whoopi Goldberg instead. Rowan Atkinson originally turned down the role of Zazu, saying he found voice work pointless and that he was more of a visual artist. But his friend and collaborator Rob Driscoll convinced him to do it. Matthew Broderick was cast as adult Simba early on in the production, and though Broderick would become known as a musical theater star, appearing just a year later in the 1995 Broadway revival of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, Joseph Williams did the singing for Simba in the movie. Joseph Williams is John Williams' son, and is also known for singing the Gummy Bears theme song and fronting the rock band Toto. Tim Curry, Malcolm McDowell, Alan Rickman, Patrick Stewart, and Ian McKellen were all considered for the role of Scar, which eventually went to Jeremy Irons. Irons was originally hesitant to play the part after just portraying Klaus von Bülow in Reversal of Fortune. Von Bülow was a Danish-British lawyer and socialite who was found guilty of attempted murder on his wife, but upon appeal was found not guilty. The animators actually studied Irons' performance in that movie in order to use some of his facial movements and habits. Pocahontas was in development at the same time as The Lion King, and most of the Disney animators opted to work on Pocahontas over The Lion King, because they thought Pocahontas would be the more prestigious of the two movies. Many of the story artists had no faith in The Lion King. Head of story on the film, Brenda Chapman, was even reluctant to take the job because the story wasn't very good. And storyboard artist Bernie Mattinson told his colleague Joe Ranft, "I don't know who's going to want to watch The Lion King." Producer Don Hahn told the Los Angeles Times in 2011, "The Lion King was considered a little movie because we were going to take some risks. The pitch for the story was a lion cub gets framed for murder by his uncle set to the music of Elton John. People said, 'What? Good luck with that.' But for some reason, the people who ended up on the movie were highly passionate about it and motivated." And yeah, so for many of the leading animators on the film, this was their first time supervising a character. More than 600 artists, animators, and technicians contributed to The Lion King, and Disney gave it a budget of $45 million. While most of the movie's animation was done at Disney's Los Angeles facilities, 20 minutes of the film, including the "I Just Can't Wait to Be King" sequence, was animated at what was then known as Disney MGM Studios in Orlando, Florida. Like on Bambi, the character animators studied real-life animals as a reference. Wildlife expert Jim Fowler came to the studio on numerous occasions and brought lions and other savanna creatures for the animators to use as a guide. The Florida animators also studied at Miami Metro Zoo. But no actual lion roars were used in the movie. They didn't record real lions. All of the lion roars were done by Frank Welker, a voice actor who just did some growling into a metal garbage can. The film's visual style was inspired by Lawrence of Arabia, the movies of John Ford, and painters like Charles Marion Russell, Frederick Remington, and Maxfield Parrish. And guess what? The Lion King isn't entirely hand-drawn. Computer animation was used to create the Stampede sequence. It took 5 specially trained animators and technicians over 2 years just to do that 1 2.5-minute scene. They used CGI to create a number of distinct wildebeests, and then multiplied them into hundreds, cel-shaded them to make them look hand-drawn, and then gave them randomized paths down the mountain to emulate the movement of a herd. The first trailer for The Lion King actually hit theaters in November of 1993, and by that point they had only finished 1/3 of the movie, meaning they had 8 months remaining to finish the other 2/3. And that first trailer was just the entire Circle of Life scene in full, because it was that good. The president of Disney's distribution arm at the time said, "It was probably one of the best 4 minutes of film that we've seen." Audience reactions to that trailer were so strong that producer Don Hahn worried the movie wouldn't live up to the hype. Then on January 17th, 1994, a 6.7 magnitude earthquake hit Los Angeles. Known as the Northridge earthquake, it shut down the studio and required the animators to finish the movie remotely at home. So what about the legendary songs? When Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast lyricist Howard Ashman died of HIV/AIDS in 1991, Tim Rice was brought on to help composer Alan Menken finish the songs for Aladdin. Disney apparently liked his work because they hired him to come back and write the lyrics for The Lion King. Alan Menken was unable to return for The Lion King, so Tim Rice suggested ABBA, but they couldn't do it because Benny Anderson was committed to the stage musical Christina Fran Duvamala. So then Tim Rice suggested Elton John. John set out to write ultra pop songs that would appeal to both children and adults. The movie only includes 5 songs: Circle of Life, Just Can't Wait to Be King, Be Prepared, Hakuna Matata, and Can You Feel the Love Tonight. But there was a 6th song that was cut, Zazu's The Morning Report. This song was put back in the movie for the IMAX and DVD release, as well as the Broadway production. Timon and Pumbaa were originally going to sing all of Can You Feel the Love Tonight, but Elton John put a stop to that, refusing to have his Disney love ballad sung by the rat and the pig. Hans Zimmer got the gig as composer, thanks to his previous work on other Africa set films, A World Apart and The Power of One. Disney did 11 test screenings prior to releasing the movie, and went all out on its marketing, launching promotional tie-ins with Burger King, Kodak, Nestle, and Payless Shoes, among others. The Lion King debuted on 2,550 screens on June 24th, 1994. It opened at #1 in the US, making $40.8 million its opening weekend, nearly matching its $45 million budget. Over the course of that original release, it would make $763 million total worldwide, making it the #1 movie of 1994, more than doubling its closest competitor, Forrest Gump. For 2 years, it was the second highest grossing movie of all time after Jurassic Park, and the highest grossing animated movie ever until Finding Nemo beat it in 2003. Disney created 28 different regional localizations for the movie, including a special Zulu version in South Africa, which you can watch on Disney Plus today. The Lion King's VHS release quickly became the best-selling tape of all time. 4.5 million copies were sold on day one, before it went on to sell a record 55 million copies worldwide. It then sold 11.9 million copies on DVD and 3.83 million Blu-rays. Altogether, the home releases have brought in more than $800 million. And by the end of 1994, Disney had made more than $1 billion on Lion King merchandise, 214 million of which just in the Christmas season. By 1995, the Lion King soundtrack had shipped more than 10 million copies, making it the only soundtrack from an animated movie to go diamond, which is 10 times platinum. Movie critics loved The Lion King. Today, 93% of the reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive, but some reviewers at the time for publications like the LA Times, TV Guide, and The New Yorker criticized the movie for not being as good as The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin, and for having less memorable songs, which is ridiculous to say in hindsight. And some also say that the hyenas reflect negative stereotypes of Black and Latino communities. The Lion King was nominated for 4 Oscars and won 2 of them. Hans Zimmer won for Best Score, and then 3 Lion King songs made the category of Best Song. Hakuna Matata, Circle of Life, and Can You Feel the Love Tonight. Can You Feel the Love Tonight won the Oscar for Best Song. It won 3 Golden Globes, Best Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy, Best Score, and Best Song, Can You Feel the Love Tonight. It was nominated for 9 Grammys, and while Can You Feel the Love Tonight and Circle of Life lost Song of the Year, the former won Best Male Pop Vocal. Circle of Life won Best Instrumental Arrangement with Accompanying Vocals. The soundtrack won Best Musical Album for Children, and Robert Guillaume, who voiced Rafiki in the movie, won Best Spoken Word Album for Children with The Lion King Read-Along. The Lion King has spawned so many sequels and spin-offs. There was a Timon and Pumbaa series that ran on CBS and Toon Disney for 85 episodes from 1995 to 1999. The direct-to-video sequel, The Lion King Simba's Pride, which came out in 1998. That's about Simba and Nala's daughter, Kiara. Then you got The Lion King 1.5, which came direct to video in 2004, which is a Timon and Pumbaa prequel that also shows what they were doing when they weren't on camera during The Lion King. So you remember how The Lion King was inspired by Hamlet? Well, the plot of Lion King 1.5 is inspired by Tom Stoppard's play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which imagines what the Hamlet characters Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are doing when they're not on stage during Hamlet. And then you've got the Lion Guard series, which aired 75 episodes on the Disney Channel starting in 2015. That show takes place between the events of The Lion King and The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. The Lion King spawned a massively popular SNES and Sega Genesis game in 1994, as well as a Timon and Pumbaa puzzle game for SNES and PC in 1995, Simba's Mighty Adventure for Game Boy Color and PlayStation in 2000, not to mention characters and settings in Kingdom Hearts and its sequel. And you probably know that The Lion King became a massively popular musical on Broadway in 1997 that won 6 Tonys, including Best Musical. But did you know it's the highest grossing Broadway production ever, having made nearly $2 billion in New York? And it's still running today, making it the 3rd longest running Broadway show in history, and that there have been 28 productions worldwide on every continent except Antarctica, and that its various global productions have grossed more than $8 billion total. In 2019, The Lion King spawned a photorealistic CGI remake, which made $1.7 billion at the box office, making it the highest grossing musical of all time, the highest grossing remake of all time, and if you consider it animated, the highest grossing animated movie of all time. Basically, every time Disney remakes The Lion King for some new form of media, it makes at least $1 billion. A prequel/sequel to the 2019 Lion King remake is coming later this year. It's called Mufasa the Lion King, focused on Mufasa and Scar's origin story, but it will also include Blue Ivy Carter as Simba's daughter, Kiara.